Imagine discovering that the person you love doesn't love you back. She studied you. Pay attention to every word, every reaction, every fear, not to get to know you, but to control you. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that your feelings aren't your own, that their choices were forced upon them, that their thoughts were shaped, and that everything you believed to be love was an experiment. Now imagine the pain of looking into that person's eyes and realizing you were never a partner. You were a test, a project, an object. That's exactly what happens in today's story, a story about silent control, clever manipulation, and the most dangerous kind of love. He who does not restrain his body restrains his mind. If this has already given you chills or reminded you of someone, keep reading. You need to listen to what's coming. Mira met Caleb during her night shift at the hospital where she worked as a nursing technician. It was 2:17 a.m. She was exhausted with deep dark circles under her eyes, holding a tray of medications, when he came running down the hallway after a security guard saying his sister was having a psychotic episode. The confusion ended quickly. It was a misunderstanding. The sister didn't exist. She was just a disoriented visitor. But Caleb stood there, trembling with worry, and thanked Mira for helping. "I'm sorry. I get easily distraught when I see someone suffering," he said, his voice breaking. Mira, who knew human pain intimately, felt empathy. He didn't seem dangerous. He just seemed like a man too sensitive for the world, the kind that life always hurts, the kind that awakens in caregivers like her an immediate instinct to protect. The following week, Caleb showed up again, this time with coffee. "You seemed tired that day. I thought this might help." Mira laughed, surprised. He remembered details that no one had ever noticed. The color of her hair tie, the way she rubbed her fingers together when she was anxious, the fact that she never ate lunch properly. He spoke little, but observed everything. "How was your shift?" he asked, listening to every word as if they were sacred secrets. They started talking at the hospital entrance amidst honking horns and sirens. Mira thought it was a coincidence, but it wasn't. Caleb knew her schedule, he knew the days, he knew where she parked. He had already mapped out her entire routine before she even realized she liked having him around. After 2 weeks, Caleb invited her to dinner at a small apartment downtown. He said he'd cook something light for her to relax after the chaos of the hospital. The apartment was cozy, a little messy, full of underlined books and old unframed photos. Mira found it charming, but what she didn't realize was how everything there seemed designed to impress her. The calm music, the hot tea, the conversation reduced to only her interests. He hardly spoke about himself. He dodged the question with vague answers, but with such natural skill that it seemed like reciprocity. "You deserve someone who takes care of you," he said, pushing a strand of her hair behind her ear. It was just a gesture, but it carried an invisible mark. Caleb had already begun to position himself as a savior while extracting information to become indispensable. At the end of the first month, Mira didn't realize anything was wrong. She was charmed by his attention, his calmness, the feeling of finally having someone who saw her. Caleb would text her when she clocked in. He'd show up with soup when she said she was sick. He'd say, "Rest," in a voice that melted away any resistance. But behind that gentleness lay calculation. He always appeared when she was vulnerable. End of shift, nights without sleep, moments of extreme exhaustion. He came as a solution, as comfort, as an escape. And each kind gesture created a silent dependency. Mira thought she was entering a sweet relationship, but in reality, she was entering a carefully constructed trap. A trap where affection would be used as a leash, and where each of her weaknesses would become a tool for control. The change didn't come like a bang, but like a cold wind rushing through a poorly closed door. Mira noticed that Caleb had begun to correct small details of her day, her lunch break, the time she spent in the lab, the tone she used when responding to someone. "I'm just trying to help you not burn out," he would say. But each correction was accompanied by a look that seemed to dissect her thoughts. When she mentioned that she missed seeing her friends, Caleb would sigh deeply, as if disappointed that she didn't realize how much they were limiting her. He spoke softly, never shouting, but his words carried the weight of someone who knew exactly where to press. Over time, Mira began to explain every decision, not because he demanded it, but because she feared disappointing him. Without realizing it, she began to live according to his feelings, not her own. Caleb never said, "You're wrong." He said something far worse. "You're remembering what happened differently." Or, "I think your mind is playing tricks on you again." Or, on the worst of days, "Your feelings are far too exaggerated to be real." Mira began recording conversations in a notepad hidden on her phone, thinking she was going crazy. But when she read them back, it seemed absurd for her to doubt him. After all, Caleb always spoke so calmly that she felt ashamed to contradict him. Things changed when she mentioned a discussion they had about a lab project. Caleb smiled, tilted his head, and said, "Mira, that conversation never happened." The certainty with which he said it made her stomach churn. Each denial erased a piece of her memory, as if she were replacing her own thoughts with his. She didn't realize it, but she was already living inside the version of reality that Caleb fabricated. Gradually, Caleb became the filter through which she saw the world. When Mira received a message from colleagues, he would comment, "They only contact you when they need something." If she talked about visiting family, he would reply, "They never supported you. I'm the only one who truly understands your mind." In less than 3 months, Mira had reduced her dates, canceled dinners, and ignored invitations because it was easier to avoid Caleb's disappointed look than to face it. The isolation didn't come in the form of prohibition. It came masked as care. He would say things like, "I just want to protect you from the people who drain you." The most destructive thing is that, deep down, Mira believed him. Loneliness settled in so slowly that when she realized it, the only voice left around her was his. Whenever Mira disagreed with something, even the slightest thing, Caleb would emotionally disappear. He wouldn't text, he wouldn't look her in the eye, he wouldn't touch her. The apartment felt heavy, as if the air were trapped. When she asked, "Did I do something wrong?" he would reply, "You always take everything negatively." Then he would become sweet, attentive, almost perfect again, but only after Mira apologized for things she didn't understand. This cycle conditioned her like a laboratory experiment: punishment for conflict, reward for submission. Her mind began to operate on the logic of fear of losing the only person who seemed to care. She didn't realize it, but she was no longer living beside Caleb. She was living inside him. What Mira was experiencing wasn't just emotional, it was neurochemical. Research from Harvard University has shown that relationships marked by intermittent reinforcement activate the same brain circuits involved in addictions. When a person alternates intense affection with silence, guilt, or emotional distance, the brain reacts by releasing dopamine unpredictably, creating psychological dependence. It's the unpredictability that is addictive. Caleb did this masterfully. After 3 days of absolute coldness, he would appear with a simple gesture of affection, like a touch on the shoulder or a "you mean everything to me." That was enough for Mira to feel a relief that in reality was emotional withdrawal being satisfied. It wasn't love, it was neural conditioning. And the more she tried to please him, the more trapped she became in the cycle. In 2019, a study from the University of London demonstrated that victims of gaslighting tend to doubt even objective memories when repeatedly exposed to subtle denial of facts. This happens because the brain begins to prioritize the socially safer version of reality. Caleb applied this mechanism with surgical precision. When he said, "That never happened," or "You're remembering wrong," he didn't need to prove anything, he just had to repeat it. Gradually, Mira began to doubt entire discussions, laboratory events, even feelings. The research showed that when the mind loses confidence in its own memories, the manipulator becomes the only stable source of truth. And that's exactly what happened. Caleb rewrote her past, one detail at a time. Classic studies of coercive control, such as those conducted by Dr. Evan Stark, show that isolation rarely begins with direct prohibitions. It begins with protective justifications. They're jealous of you. They don't want what's best for you. I'm the only one who understands you. This pattern is universal among highly controlling manipulators. What Caleb did to Mira follows the results of these studies almost meticulously, creating a reality in which the manipulator is the only safe haven while everyone else is a threat. The victim, believing she is being cared for, cuts essential ties. When she realizes it, she no longer has a support network to validate her own perception. This is what made her so vulnerable. She was alone, and she didn't even know it.
Skinner shows that emotional silence, also called withdrawal punishment, it's a powerful form of control. It works because it activates the social pain area in the brain, the same area that responds to rejection or exclusion. When Caleb simply stopped talking, looking at, or touching Mira, he triggered this mechanism without raising his voice. Her brain interpreted the silence as a threat. If I lose this, I'll be completely alone. And so, Mira began to self-censor, shaping her behavior to what she thought Caleb would approve of. It wasn't a coincidence. It was experimental psychology applied to a real relationship. The collapse began on a quiet night in the lab when Mira found a hidden file on Caleb's private server. It was a folder with her name on it, M-I-R-A, filled with voice recordings, copies of her reports, and even transcripts of private conversations she'd never realized were being monitored. The shock came quickly, hot, piercing her chest like a shard of glass. Adrian hadn't just manipulated her emotions, he was literally studying her mind as an experiment. And then, the worst, a document titled Protocol L7, Behavioral Override Candidate. There, her life was dismantled, analyzed, reduced to graphs of emotional vulnerability. The truth fell upon her with overwhelming weight. She wasn't a partner, she was a project. When Caleb entered the lab and saw her in front of the files, his smile didn't falter. He didn't try to deny it. He just walked slowly, like someone who knows he's still in control. "Mira, I needed to prove that emotional patterns can be reprogrammed. You were brilliant at it." The words were like knives. She tried to answer, but he interrupted her with that low voice that always calmed her, now transformed into poison. "You think this is about you. It's about scientific advancement." It was then that Laura felt something break. It wasn't fear. It was a brutal lucidity, a cold awareness that tore apart all the enchantment he had built. As long as she knew she couldn't confront him emotionally, he dominated that terrain. So she did what he would never expect. She used his own methodology against him. While talking to him, she discreetly released a bug she had created weeks earlier during testing, code that would corrupt Caleb's database and send copies of the documents to the university's ethics committee. Every second, Caleb's gaze shifted from absolute confidence to unease, then to contained anger. "What did you do?" he asked. For the first time, Mira saw fear in his eyes. The manipulator was realizing he had lost control. She left the lab without looking back. As she walked down the narrow, empty corridor, she felt adrenaline surge, as if she were escaping psychological captivity. The next morning, Caleb was removed from his duties, investigated, and his lab was shut down. But the real consequence wasn't his punishment, it was his liberation. Mira finally understood that control doesn't begin when someone ties you up, it begins when someone convinces you to hand over the keys. And that night, regaining her composure, she vowed to herself that no one would ever again touch her thoughts without permission. The escape wasn't just physical, it was mental. When Mira finally left the lab, she didn't feel victorious, she felt empty. Because the worst part of escaping a manipulator isn't the escape itself, it's about looking back and realizing how much of you were trapped in there. In the following weeks, she struggled with something no one saw, the echo of Caleb's voice inside her head, his phrases still running like invisible commands. "You're just reacting. You're confused. I just want to help you." That's when Mira realized the most painful truth. Caleb no longer had control over his life, but he was still in control of his thinking process. And that's what high-level manipulators do. They don't take your freedom, they take your perception of freedom. They make you doubt your own instincts, your own memory, of reality itself. Mira only began to regain her composure when she did something simple yet brutal. She wrote down everything that happened, line by line, scene by scene. And for the first time, she saw the story without his editing, without his filter, without his excuses. That's when she finally took a deep breath and said aloud, "I'm coming back to myself now." And that was the moment when control ended. Not when she left, not when she confronted him, but when she understood. What Caleb did to Mira wasn't love, it was emotional engineering. And here are the dark psychology mechanisms he used. 1. Cognitive gaslighting. He wasn't denying the facts, he was questioning her interpretation. Tactics used by sophisticated manipulators. They don't say, "That didn't happen." They say, "You misunderstood." This erodes the victim's inner confidence. 2. Programmed emotional dependency. He offered affection as a reward, silence and coldness as punishment. This creates what is called intermittent reinforcement, as proven in behavioral studies. It's the same mechanism used in addictions. 3. Control through information. He always knew more than she did. He knew what she felt, what she feared, what she desired, and he used that knowledge to guide his decisions. Emotional control starts like this, with someone who knows your weaknesses, and he uses them all. 1. If you always need to justify yourself, you are being controlled. Love doesn't require constant defending. 2. If someone is always interpreting your feelings for you, run. This is not caring, it's psychological invasion. 3. If you're more afraid of disappointing someone than you're afraid of losing yourself, something is already wrong. If this story affected you, if you saw someone you know, or worse, if you saw him, don't leave the video yet. Subscribe to the channel now, because here we expose tactics that nobody talks about, and we tell stories that help you understand the human mind in its darkest form. Comment below, "I see it now," if you'd like me to send more stories and analyses like this in future videos. And before I go, watch the next video that is appearing on the screen. He can open your eyes to something you haven't noticed yet. The next story, this might be exactly what you needed to hear.